through the morning's newspapers. I'm pleased to say we're joined by the broadcaster and journalist, Badisha, and by the broadcaster and writer, Edward Adu. Good morning to you both, Badisha. Good morning, Edward. Good morning. Lovely to have you with us on Saturday morning here on Sky News. All right, let's get going with what's in the papers. So, Badisha, we'll start off with you. The front page of the Telegraph is what you have picked out. It's not that story about Liz Truss and NATO giving weapons to Moldova, but a story beneath the fold, which is fascinating, actually, about, and this is all about power of attorney, but more specifically, it's about people working from home in the civil service, isn't it?
That's precisely it. So you've got to read this article with a little bit of skepticism, because it's deliberately designed to pull on the heartstrings and say that those people who are trying to acquire power of attorney to their family, their loved ones who perhaps need some assistance in that regard, well, usually if you phoned up, you'd be told that it would be a 40-day process to gain power of attorney. Now it's going to be a 140-day process. But actually, this is about exactly what you identified, which is, you remember Jacob Rees-Mogg a few weeks ago saying, chuntering on about people working from home. The government wants to cut the number of civil service jobs by up to a third. And they're homing in on civil servants who they say are working from home. And they're saying that as a result, the department has become, to quote from a government critic, not fit for purpose. Now, it's very difficult to know who to believe in this regard, because we know, of course, that there is a kind of legitimate ulterior motive, which is that the government want people to stop working from home and go back into the office. This is a way to revive ailing sales and trade and passing trade in city centres and town centres, and to get the rail and transport networks back off the background and selling tickets and having lots and lots of travelling again. That's what's really going on here. And power of attorney is a very emotional way to kick into.
Yeah, and there's other evidence as well in the inside page of the Telegraph about the issues with working from home as they see it. But the department concerned with this, Edward, as you will have seen, the OPG said that people working from home has no bearing on the delays, so they're blaming delays on something else. Now, I thought this was almost settled that, as we got into the pandemic, certain jobs could be done well from home and certain jobs couldn't, and we were kind of set with that, but it seems to have changed slightly now we're out of the pandemic, doesn't it?
It's certainly changed the landscape. I mean, a lot of people, they've kind of gone into the practice of working from home, and it seems, for people who have children, in terms of childcare costs, they can work around it. But, I mean, clearly the government want people to go to work, and there has to be kind of like a fine line to say, well, look, what can be done in order to make sure that resources can be put in place for people. Because I don't have any kids, but friends of mine who've got kids have said that, in particular, childcare costs are extortionate, and that is what is preventing some of them from going back to work. They think the practice of juggling, looking after their kids and whilst working and doing, literally working from the table, it works for them. So I think the government needs to try and figure out a plan, or to try and sort of figure out what, or at least acknowledge the frustrations and the challenges that some people are having.
Yeah, it's certainly become a sort of a dividing line, one of those cultural issues, actually, really. I think that's where we've got to it with this particular one. All right, Edward, let's keep it moving then. We'll move on to the front page of the Daily Mirror. I mean, it's kind of in the same sort of ballpark, isn't it?
It's kind of like in the same...
haves and have-not.
Kind of in the same vein.
Yeah.
No, exactly. Kind of in the same vein, but the haves and have-nots. And there's been pressure for the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, and the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, to do something to help with the increased cost of living cost. And I mean, for me, it's challenging. My car failed its MOT. I don't have a car. I have to rely now on public transport until I can find a car, because apparently there are no cars available.
Yeah.
And also the supermarkets, food prices are going up. Everything is going up. But this is the story connected to the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, and his wife, Akshata Murthy, and they're on the Sunday Times rich list, apparently worth 730 million, nearly £1 billion. Now, many will say that the government clearly need to kind of understand what is going on. Many people, I watched a Panorama documentary on the BBC a couple of weeks ago about families who can't even afford to put to top up their meters. So I'm not blaming the Chancellor and his wife for the fortunes that they've made, but I mean, clearly they're on the Sunday Times rich list, and a lot of people are saying if the government don't step up now and help people, then clearly it may cost them dearly in the next election.
Yeah.
So I think something needs to be done in order for the Chancellor and the Prime Minister to kind of, to step up and say, well, look, we need to, because people reading that article in the front page of the Daily Mail will say, well, look, Rishi Sunak, he's nearly worth £1 billion. I can't even put money in my meter. What's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Badisha, we're not along to some of that, but let's be fair. It's not Miss Sunak's fault that her father was really, really successful. It's not Rishi Sunak's fault that he made a lot of money when he was working in the city.
That's absolutely true. Rishi Sunak was very lucky to marry a woman that he not only loves, but also comes from an incredibly upscale, very, very high-achieving, wealthy family. But what's really galling people is just the sheer scale of wealth to poverty in this country. That's what makes people feel so outraged, because everyone is working equally hard. The people at the less advantaged end of the scale are struggling and working just as much as Mr. Banker that says he works very hard all day long. And they're asking themselves, well, how on earth do I get out of this? If you've got galloping inflation, that's the rate at which prices are rising, and you also have fuel price rises, pretty much stagnant wage rises, wages aren't rising that much, and then you have this devolution into the gig economy, so that you have fewer opportunities, you have fewer abilities to save for pensions, for family, for early years learning, and then you have the bottom dropping out of essential social services. It creates a situation where no matter how hard you work or how determined you are or whatever it is that rich politicians say, you can't get out of that position of extreme inequality and poverty. And you read the headlines, and because of other things happening in the world, such as Russia and Ukraine, you know that fuel prices, inescapable, unavoidable things, are going to get worse.
Absolutely right. Okay, Badisha, thank you for that. All right, let's move on to the next story that we've got here. This is one of yours, Badisha. This is the front page of the Eye. Exciting weekend coming up in a couple of weeks as the Jubilee kicks off on the 2nd of June, and the Eye are reporting that some of the, as they describe them, the royal outcasts, I suppose they're not working members of the royal family anymore, are no longer going to be attending, are going to attend, the opposite, are going to be attending the Jubilee celebrations.
Yeah, this is a bit more of the old lives of the rich and famous. I think I took exception to this cover article because, to me, outcasts are different from each other. So Meghan Markle and Prince Harry have decided to step away from the royal family, but they haven't done anything. They're not perpetrators. Prince Andrew has been stripped of his royal duties out of disgrace. Those are not comparable to each other. And in fact, what we're hearing is that the Queen is really favouring Prince Andrew over a young couple who decided that the royal system didn't work for them. So really, to me, this is a story about what kind of monarchy do you accept in the 21st century. Yes, of course, we celebrate the Platinum Jubilee and all the rest of it. But do you want a royal family that is accountable, that takes account of what the rule of law says? Or do you want a royal family that forces out the youngest, most promising members who actually do represent the way that we all live in the 21st century, a multiracial relationship, a young couple who want to work rather than receive privileges? So to me, it's a story about privilege and tradition.
Yeah, perhaps the changing nature of the royal family as well in the coming years. All right, let's go to the final story of this section, if we can, Edward. This is, you picked up the front page of the Times. Their headline, Rail Strike Chaos Looms, as the union threatens the biggest walkout in history. I mean, you were just saying your car's in the shop all gone, so you're going to be in trouble here.
Listen, I'm in trouble. It's still in the shop. Hopefully, we'll sell it. Someone will take it. But at the moment, I've got to use the trains, and this is not good news for me or for anyone else who is relying on the trains. And apparently, they said this is going to be the biggest strike since the mid-1920s, and it's all connected to pay and redundancies. And apparently the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, and the Transport Minister, Grant Shapps, are going to have a meeting to try and to figure out what's going on. But, I mean, clearly, this will grind the country to a halt. And managers apparently are preparing to run the services. I mean, literally, they said there may be skeleton services. When you hear skeleton services put into a sentence regarding train services, you know your train may only run an hourly service. So I've got my fingers crossed. I hope they can resolve this, because I mean it would be a disastrous summer if we have any rail strikes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and just quickly, Bidisha, we haven't got much time, but I mean, this will, of course, annoy people who are reading it and relying on the trains, because we know that train prices annually go up, and yet the service, as we know, just seems to keep getting worse.
Absolutely, but exactly as Edward said, this is the latest in a number of pay disputes between rail network workers and their bosses. So clearly there is a mismatch in the expectations of management and the way that workers themselves, the people who are on the ground every day, perceive their daily working life. They're talking about pay, they're talking about conditions, and I think what they're saying to their employers is, look, you're saying that you're going to level up, you're going to expand the network, you're going to improve all of these things. If your workforce stays the same in number and all you're asking us to do is work and work and work greater hours, possibly even at risk to ourselves or at risk to the passengers, there needs to be some sort of wiggle room here. So, of course, the knock-on benefit or the knock-on effects, the demerits are experienced by the passengers. But actually, I do hear and understand what the workers themselves are saying, because I don't think that this is out of greed.
No, perhaps not. Well, we'll see how this one plays out. Okay, Bidisha, Edward, for now, thank you so much. Back again in the next hour. Now, we'll have plenty more, of course, to come on Sky News Breakfast. We'll have the very latest, as the Prime Minister is now being asked to explain why he met with the senior civil servant Sue Gray, who was investigating those lockdown-breaking parties in Downing Street. We'll have more on that after the break.